Senator Franken.
Dr. Flynn, thank you for being here today. I know you've been the target of a lot of anger and frustration of late, and I appreciate your being here. Thank you for your expression of empathy and sadness for those who died on the rig. When we had the hearing a few weeks ago, one of the fathers of one of the men who died on the rig was here, and he said that no one from BP had ever talked to him and expressed their apologies or condolences. Have you talked to any of the members of the families of those who died?
I've not personally talked to them, but I would have expected that BP people would have done that.
You would have expected it?
Normally, if there's an accident, then our business people would get involved, but I don't know the details in this particular case.
So you don't know for sure whether anyone from BP has contacted any of those families, do you?
I don't know that, but I could find out.
Well, this gentleman said that no one from BP had talked to him. Mm-hmm. I think you should know that. The Center for Public Integrity recently published a report noting that BP is responsible for 760 of the 761 egregious and willful, that's what they're called, OSHA violations over the past 3 years. This is post-Texas City, of course, when you were going to change your culture of safety. That's a pretty hard statistic to believe. Do you have any comment on that?
We were disappointed with the 760 violations because we believed that we were in compliance with the requirements of those orders. Now, what I would say is that in making those citations, OSHA did use a differential approach. They did do a per instance citation versus in other cases where they would find a system finding. And so that generates a higher number of citations. We wouldn't be comparing apples with apples in other cases. All of that said, we're absolutely committed to resolving those differences with OSHA, to fixing the problems. And at the end of the day, OSHA and ourselves do want to achieve the same thing, a safe workplace and safety for workers.
Okay, well, I mentioned in my opening statement in my conversation with Mr. Drevna, the president of the National Petrochemical and Refiners Association, and I was asking him about the industry's efforts to self-monitor and self-regulate, and in response he explained that there were efforts within his group to set and meet industry safety standards, as I said, within their trade group. And then when I mentioned this figure, 760 out of 761, I mean, it seems to make BP seem to be something of an outlier. And this is on egregious and willful. Egregious and willful violations. So when I asked him why more hadn't been done to correct the problems at BP, he replied that BP wasn't a member, and that it was the only major refinery that wasn't a member. Why aren't you a member of that trade association, which seems to have at least some self-policing within their own group on safety? And I mean, the 760 of 761 seems to suggest that you may be something of an outlier.
I've talked about the 760 and how a different approach was taken on that, and the fact that we are working to resolve those differences with OSHA. I don't believe that we are an outlier, and we work with multiple trade associations, both in the USA and around the world. So we certainly have.
You work with them, you say, but I'm asking why you aren't a member of a trade group that self-polices its safety standards. And yet you are the only major refinery that operates in the United States that isn't a member of this self-policing trade association.
So I will need to look into the the specific situation with the NPRA. I understood that we were a member of the NPRA, and so would need to find out.
You thought you were a member of this?
BP certainly has been a member of NPRA, so perhaps something has changed. I'll need to look into it and get back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Flynn, how do you feel this is going?
I'm happy to answer your questions.
Mm-hmm. If we had come to you the day before the Transocean explosion, would you have said that there are processes and systems in place to make sure that it didn't happen? You suspect that would have been your testimony?
That's our intent, is that we operate safely. We put in place processes and systems to do that, among other things. Okay,
number of us have referred to these egregious and willful citations, and you said that we're not comparing apples with apples. We'll have to take your word for it, I guess, that OSHA somehow treated your willful and egregious violations differently than others. Let me read you the definition of an egregious willful citation. Issued for each instance of a willful and flagrant violation. Willful. Willful. 760 for BP. Other refineries, 1. Willful citations issued for violations with intentional disregard for employee safety and health. 69 for BP. Is that a culture of safety? Would you say that having intentional disregard for employee safety and health is a sign of a culture of safety? Or would you say that's maybe the opposite?
So we were really disappointed with the outcome of that.
I know you've said that a number of times. You've said that every time. You're very disappointed. Were you alarmed?
We're working with them to resolve.
Were you alarmed?
As you described, and as I described earlier, it's a large number, and so naturally it attracts attention and attracted our attention, which is why we've looked into it to understand what's happening and are working constructively with OSHA to resolve our differences.
So I take it you weren't alarmed. Were you embarrassed?
I mean, we take feedback from the regulator very, very seriously, and so therefore we've responded. We're working with them. We're absolutely committed to resolving the issues.
I'll take that as a no. Serious citations, of which you have 30, issued for violations with a substantial probability of death or serious injury. Okay. Again, we had the father of one of the men who was killed at the Transocean explosion testify here, and he said that no one from BP had come and talked to him. It's Christopher Jones. It was actually the brother. I'm sorry, the brother testified. His brother, Gordon Lewis Jones, died on the Deepwater Horizon. Would you commit to this committee to reaching out to each of the families of the men who died and personally apologizing? Because he said no one had ever from BP had apologized, and he felt really awful about that. Would you personally commit to the committee that you'll do that?
Let me take that request back, because I think BP will want to reach out.
No, I'm asking you a different question. I'm not asking you to commit to going back to BP and discussing it. I'm asking you, Dr. Flynn, if you will commit to us that you will personally get in touch with each of the families of the 11 men who died and reach out personally to them.
If any of those families want to talk to me, then I would be happy to do that. It's a devastating tragedy, and I can only begin to imagine what those folks are going through. And if there's anything,
so they have to reach out to you?
If there's anything I can do to help, then I would be glad to do that.
Okay. Would you then reach out to these families in a way where they have the opportunity to talk to you, and where you can express your condolences and express your sorrow?
Of course. I mean, I've already expressed my condolences and sorrow here.
I meant to each of them personally, to the families.
I'm happy to do whatever would help. If that will help, then I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Flynn, I really believe that worker participation in improving workplace safety is essential. Workers are really in the best position to identify, on-the-ground safety risks. The original Baker report notes that BP had not established a, quote, positive, trusting, and open environment. Do you remember that from the report?
I remember the comments.
Yeah, I think it was a written report, right? In which workers could approach management. BP had not established a positive, trusting, and open environment in which workers could approach management about their concerns and at all of their facilities. Yet, as I mentioned, so that was the report about the 2005 explosion there and deaths. Yet, as I mentioned in my opening statement, the New York Times reported this morning that workers at Transocean were afraid of reporting safety concerns. They were afraid of, quote, corporate-level reprisal. One of the workers complained of, quote, fear tactics. So this is the environment that employees were working in 3 years after the Baker report recommended implementing a positive, trusting, and open environment. When can we expect such an environment to become a reality for people who work for BP?
So inside of BP, I would have to agree that a cooperative relationship with the workforce so that they can bring forward concerns is really important. The Baker panel pointed it out, and we're very, very committed. So we've put in place actions to promote that. So we're already in action about it. When I hear those reports for what happened on board the Transocean Enterprise rig, then that gives me cause for concern. We wouldn't expect that sort of thing to be happening, and so therefore it's something that would need to be looked into.
Okay. You took this job when? In 2007, right?
Yes, 2007.
Okay. And when we went over these statistics on egregious willful citations and serious citations, these are from 2007 through 2010, from June of 2007 to February of 2010. I have to agree with the chair that there seems to be a disconnect between your testimony and what appears to be the reality here. Now, you are the Vice President of Health, Safety, Security, and Environment. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you're in charge of all this, right? You're responsible.
My role is to set standards, to advise executive management and those that are implementing those standards, and then to monitor trends and give advice to the executives if intervention is needed. But in BP, we're clear that the business line is accountable for delivering safety along with business, and safety is the first priority.
Okay, I'm not sure what that answer meant. Do you feel responsible? Do you feel you have a responsibility to the safety of people working for BP?
So I have a part to play, and my role is to establish standards that extend company-wide and programs. I'm also responsible for advising executive managers and those that implement those standards, and for monitoring progress through things like audit. That's what I'm responsible for.
I think part of the disconnect isn't just between your testimony and reality. It's sort of between the human catastrophe and tragedy that we saw and the affect that we get from you. And I think that is disturbing to other members of the committee. I know it was to Senator, well, I don't want to speak for Senator Merkley, but that's what I felt. And I just think that it was very disturbing to me that no one from BP had made any attempt to get in touch with the families. Maybe you're right. Maybe they don't want to hear from you at this point. Maybe it's just been too long. But it's just speaking to you man to man, I just don't get it. I don't get your, I don't get BP. I don't get its lack of remorse or the way it expresses it. Thank you, Madam Chair.